course, Evidence, Impact and Policies. This is being co-hosted by Generation India. And so I'd like to invite Arunesh Singh, CEO of Generation India Foundation, to come and give us a welcome note.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arunesh Singh. I'm the CEO of Generation India. Welcome to you all, and thank you so much for spending the time to be part of this panel. What I'm going to do in the next 8 to 10 minutes is to introduce you to Generation India Foundation and the work that we do in India. Generation, our mission is to transform education to employment systems to prepare, place, and support people into life-changing careers. Opportunities that would not have been accessible to them otherwise. Our vision is to provide a meaningful career and sustained well-being for our learners anywhere in the world. We are a global organization. We were incubated 10 years ago by McKinsey and Company through its McKinsey Social Initiative. We work in 17 countries. India is the largest operator amongst the network. Now, what do we do? I think a lot of us in this room are trying to do the same thing, which is to address the employment problem. The fact that supply doesn't talk to demand and vice versa. There's lack of coordination in the skilling ecosystem. There are systemic barriers that our learners face. There's also a gender aspect of that. And that hiring still continues to be done on the basis of CVs and not demonstrated skills. Now, the way we address this problem is through our holistic, demand-driven 7-step methodology. This methodology is horizontal. It can be taken from one job role, one geography to another, and you will achieve the same outcomes of better quality training, placements, and retention. We start with the job, and what you see on the right-hand side is that we always start with the job. Unless we're not sure that 80% of our learners will get jobs, we will not get into that sector. So we understand the pain points of the employer, we customize the curricula according to that, and then the next step comes in, which is to get the right learner in the classroom. We do intrinsics, we do entry gate assessments to ensure that the right learner comes into the classroom. And then the training starts. The training is of course domain, but we do a lot of behaviors and mindsets which are customized to each job role. Now, I know the industry calls it soft skills, we like to call it behaviors and mindsets. It's not the same thing because we are customizing it to every job role. And it's 70% practical. So, our learners are able to hit the ground running. And then, see, we don't stop at training. We are an organization that is geared towards employability and economic mobility. So, we ensure that our learners get jobs. And we will not start cohort unless until 1.5 times the number of jobs are already lined up before. So, which is why 100% of our learners, almost 100% of our learners, get an opportunity for an interview. And then the process follows, and about 70 to 80% of our learners actually get jobs. So that's very important for us. We also know that our learners come from poor backgrounds, tier 3, tier 4 cities. 97% of them have never done a job before. They're first-time employees. 50% of them are women. So we know that if we don't provide them some sort of mental health support, they will drop out. Those who come from the skills sector here would know that the highest dropouts are in the first 10 days, whether it's in training or at a job. So our learners are supported through clinical psychologists. These clinical psychologists basically are called mentors under this program. And basically, they get about 6 interactions with our mentors. 3 into the training and 3 into the job. This has really helped us, of course, improve the mental well-being of our learners, but also ensure that our sort of dropout rates are mainly contained. We do a lot of work on also trying to ensure that the industry sees value of the skilling program. These are entry-level jobs. And when I joined this sector about 7 years ago, everybody basically said at entry level, people are treated like warm bodies. And that's largely because we are not able to prove the ROI against the work that we do. So we do work with ROI systems to prove the value of what we do as an organization. We measure our impact at 3 levels: breadth, depth, and durability. I think breadth everybody does. It's a sheer number of people. Depth, many of you in this room do, which is placements and retention. You would see our placement percentages at 6 months is 82% and 77% in 3 months. We also do durability outcomes. Now that is sustained employment, income investing outcomes. And you would see 73% of our graduates continue to be engaged in paid work 2 to 5 years out. Now that's something we measure consciously. We don't stop at 1 year or 6 months. We go way beyond to be able to be engaged with our learners. Now, what's our value proposition? We do system strengthening. We work with the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. We work with state governments. We basically create blended financing models, placement-linked incentives, and industry partnership frameworks. So we are trying to do what is referred to as systems change across the ecosystem. We bring in learning resources in the sense that we are trying to create a playbook that the industry can use after we've gone, of 3 to 5 years of engagement. They will sort of run it with themselves, so that we are not required at that point in time. We bring in a lot of data, we bring in a lot of tools across the entire 7-step methodology. There are a lot of tools. My team is here. If people are interested, please engage with them. They will let you know as to what these tools are. These are open source for the most part. And then we bring in measurement of durable outcomes. Because we work with the ecosystem, we provide a framework to our training partners to track durable outcomes. Because we have to shift the narrative from just merely training to employment and retention. So that's our value proposition. We have 2 types of programs. Inorganic programs are largely government programs that we work with the central government and state governments. I have told you we work with the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, MSDC. We also work with the state of Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, and we are pursuing other states as well. Now, what we do is we forge public-private partnerships. The concept is simple, that 50% of the payout to the training partner continues to happen as per common cost norms. What we do is we bring in private philanthropy and we add payouts for placements and retention. So it's an outcome-based pay-for-success model where the training partners actually monetarily incentivized to get into placements and into retention. We've demonstrated that in Project Amber, and we continue to demonstrate that in projects that we have in our state governments. We also create processes for training partners to sort of get, or for the government to select the right kind of training partners, so what sort of a portfolio the government should have. We also do organic programs, which represent about 10% of our total work. This is more customized for private philanthropies. Now, this is an interesting slide because we want to ensure that we are not the only ones talking about our success, and there is a third party that actually does our assessment. This was done by Mathematica, which is a globally renowned evaluation agency, not easy to work with. And what you see on the left-hand side is the short-term outcomes. You would see our placement outcomes are 3x of the comparison group, 66 to 21. The comparison group is largely PMK words. Then our wage outcomes are higher at 14 and 38%. 90% of our learners continue to be in jobs at 60 days in the short term. If you go to the right-hand side, you will again see very similar outcomes. What we are not so proud of is what you see at the bottom, which is the gender disparity. 54% of men continue to be in jobs, whereas only 34% of women continue to be in jobs. A lot of this is, some of it is in our control, some of it is not. Those of whom will be attending the session at 4:30, we will talk about this disparity and how do we sort of address it. And I'm welcoming you all to be part of that as well. So now just to bring in context to what this forum is all about, what this panel is all about. So over the years, India has launched ambitious skills programs, we all know that. Yet success is still measured on enrollment and certification, not on employment and retention. That focus has not shifted largely. And we need to shift from number of people trained to lives transformed and sustained. Project Amber, which is our largest flagship program that we did with the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, demonstrated that, which is the Mathematica study that I showed to you. We are able to track not just job placement, but income stability and retention at 6 and 12 months. The project also studies what works, the playbook that I was talking about. And this is something we are proud of. That Mathematica says that the positive results are attributable to generations methodology. This is an evaluation agency, you never get 10 out of 10. So they have said reasonable confidence, which is statistically significant. So, as far as we are concerned, we're really happy with that. See, what you need to do is to create longitudinal evidence is what really turns good pilots into policy. That's what we are trying to do. Generation's goal is to serve as a capacity building lab for this skills ecosystem. The GFR board, Mr. Rajat Gupta is here, and he'll also speak about his vision towards generation. So, keeping this in mind and our background as an organization, we put together these two panels, which is the first one that you're here for, which is future ready workforce evidence, impact and policies. And the second one is beyond numbers, how we will navigate the workforce. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a good time and enjoy this session.
Thank you, Arunesh. That was a really great introduction and reminds me just how much synergy there is between the work that Generation India is doing and not just doing at the individual level, at the people level, but also at the systemic workforce level, the durability of it all. Now I'd like to introduce our panel to discuss the future ready workforce. Could we, thank you. Introducing, please welcome on stage Rajat Gupta, Senior Partner and Chairperson at McKinsey & Company, as well as Generation India. Please welcome Dr. Manish Mishra, Vice President and Head of Skill Development at Naveen Jindal Foundation, Jindal Steel. Please welcome Kishore, Lead Corporate Social Responsibility, Microsoft Corporation India Private Limited. And our final panelist, Jyoti Sharma, CEO of NASCOM Foundation. And last but not least, Nandita Sebastian, Vice President Data and Research at Generation India Foundation. Over to you, Nandita.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. And I welcome you all once again to this session, Future Ready Workforce, Evidence, Impact and Policies. I'm Nandita Sebastian from Generation India Foundation, and I'm really excited to be moderating this discussion on what it will take to prepare the workforce for the future. I'd like to start with a data point from the Future of Jobs report by World Economic Forum, which says that by 2030, almost 40% of the core skills that we use today will no longer be relevant, and new ones will take their place. What this means is that the world of work is changing, and it's changing fast. So the big question that lies before us is, how do we keep our skilling ahead of this curve? To help us unpack this, we have a fantastic panel here, representing corporate policy, philanthropy, industry, people who are not just talking about the future of work, but shaping it. So thank you all for being here. And let's dive right into the panel discussion. So Rajat, I'd like to start with you to bring the policy and macro level perspective based on your experience of advising corporates and governments, and also on the share of Generation India, that what policy shifts or partnerships between government, industry, and non-profits do you think are most needed to make India's workforce truly future ready?
Thank you, Nandita, and thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I think I'm going to answer a slightly different question, which is to say, look, out of what we have learned from Generation, as well as some sense of what India needs going forward with the basic Bharat vision that we have, and the changes, major trends that are underway in the world. What are the things that we are learning that are then applicable for anybody in the ecosystem, and government perhaps most of all, because outside India it is the largest funder in the ecosystem, and it's perhaps by that measure, the largest player in that ecosystem. So I think I thought about 6 things, some of which have been covered by Ramesh, and 1 or 2 by you. I think the first and most important one to me is demand driven. So skilling is not schooling. Schooling is supply driven. Everybody, all of us have to go through our primary education, secondary education, albeit though even there will be streams that we may take to orient us towards certain types of demand going forward. But skilling historically in India has been treated very much in a similar way to schooling, which is you skill and then you hope the person gets employed, right? And hope and expect that the person will get employed. But it's not the case. And it's not the case particularly where you have a large number of supply of people and unskilled labor. And the supply of people is coming from many sources. There's of course the demographic population increase itself, young people growing up. There's also formalization of jobs. And then there's 100 million people that have to come off our farms. We have in our farms, right? Maybe 100, 150 in the next 20, 25 years have to come off our farms into non-farm employment. So there's a large supply, and the demand is uncertain. It's in pockets, largely metropolitan cities or larger cities or industrial clusters. And that's where the demand lies, right? So you could end up skilling people in a particular geography, in a particular trade, and the demand may not be there, the job may not be there to be had, unless the matching happens. So this idea of demand driven, where you actually start with demand. And this has to be done both at a strategic level, which brings me to a second point, and at a tactical level. So what do I mean by strategic level? What kind of jobs are going to get created in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? And therefore, what is the nature of skilling that we need to do, right? So McKinsey did research, what is going to create value and what is going to add to our GDP. There are 18 arenas that we identified, which includes things like obvious ones like renewables, electric vehicles, infrastructure, construction, which will all add 30 to 50% of GDP, incremental GDP in the next 20 odd years. So clearly there are going to be jobs that are going to be created there, and the supply won't be there because the skilling for that, a lot of which actually happens on the job in our context, isn't happening today. So there's the strategic dimension of saying, let's take a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, whatever long-term view of this. And then there is a short-term matching view of this which has to be taken, which is to make it demand-driven. That is to say that where is the specific job for which I'm training somebody for next year's graduation or next month's graduation, right? And unless that's done in a very structured manner, there's a lot of waste. And the skilled people, 20% of them will get placed, as Ramesh said, rest won't. All the 80% of the rest of the money is wasted in the most part. So this tight matching between demand and the supply side becomes an important measure, right? So points number 1 and 2, tactically and strategically, demand driven. I think the third point I'll make is that in making this happen, the ecosystem has to be working on an outcome basis. So obviously the government, when it pays providers, or its companies when they skill people, trainers, or it's people like ourselves who are acting as a bit of a glue or a catalyst in this process, have to measure ourselves by outcomes. We can't just, not output, I've skilled so many people, not input, I've enrolled so many people, but outcomes. How many have I placed, how many have retained their jobs, how many stay in jobs a year, 2 years from now. As Ramesh said, even for our graduates, we find that number is relatively small, less than 50%, not acceptable in my view. So I think the third point is really around measurement of outcomes through the chain. Then the fourth point I'll make is, since government is the largest participant, largest funder, probably by far, I would assume 70% of the total skilling funding. Nobody's done this work as far as I know, but 60-70% is probably government funding. Then there'll be private funding, and then there'll be individual funding, and there's philanthropic funding, of course. So a lot of it is government funding, but the delivery still has to be private or social. I'm counting both of them together. The delivery of these has to be that way because either the people have to hold themselves accountable. So the private sector is skilling, they'll say, is the person ready for the job? They'll measure themselves, is the bill being wasted, is it not? Or if the private sector is funding on the back of government money, then the government has to be able to ask them, have you achieved the outcomes? So I think, there is a process of accountability that gets established if there's a bit of an arm's length. So particularly with respect to the government, right? So that's the other important dimension, private delivery of this. And then if you match two of the things that I talked about above, payment for outcomes, particularly in government-driven programs, but even in private driven programs, right? If they use suppliers, how do you get into that? And this is a soft topic on which payment for outcomes has been hard to do because the measures have been. So that's the fifth point I'd make. And finally, in this, I will also say capabilities, particularly of the largest ecosystem participant, which is the government itself. Right? So if the government has to do the strategic thinking of saying what kind of jobs are going to come out, if they're going to do the demand-based assessment of private providers, if they have to choose private providers, if they have to evaluate private providers, if they have to blacklist them, if they have to reward them, if they have to grow them, all of this requires a degree of government capability to do PPP, public-private or public-social partnership, in a unique way. So I think these are the 6 things that I see as being critically important and have to be infused in anything that we do.
Thank you so much, Raju. That's a great point about, and you've articulated it very succinctly on how these 6 points are important and about this is how the policy needs to translate into operations essentially. So moving on, I think Manish, I'll come to you next. Having led successfully the very big initiatives like the Sankar Project Amber, NAPS, all of those. That what are some of the lessons that you think can be learned from large-scale programs that can inform both policy and practice to make India's workforce globally competitive?
Thank you, Anita, and thank you, Team Generation, for having me here. For a very large part of what Rajat said, I'm in complete agreement with all his observations. Having worked with the short-term and now also with the long-term scaling ecosystem in the country, I have come to now realize that we need to probably start a little early in the kid's life. Probably right from the very school stage, we need to start thinking of how to prepare the person for the work. Primarily for 2 reasons. One, the way the technology is diffusing so fast, and therefore the skill obsolescence has actually become the order of the day. To match that pace, you probably require much more than hard and technical and vocational skilling. It's a very different kind of skilling. Soft skills is what we used to call it. But I feel now World Bank calls it workplace skills, and you might actually call it by any other name, but there's something that needs to be thought about, and there has to be a very early exposure. So when I think of it, I feel there's a world of education, and then there's a world of work. And for the ones who have not gone to the IITs or IIMs that Rajat has, how do you transition from the world of education to the world of work actually is a challenge. And we do not have systems that support it. And you're talking about programs like the National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme or Internship Training Scheme and a lot of other schemes that have been introduced. They all need a very strong programmatic capability in order to induct the college and school-going students and then make them have that exposure to the workplace very early in their lives. So that is something that is very, very important in my view. The second observation is, and this is also that very late realization, I was also a great votary of very private-led, private sector-funded kind of skilling program. And as I said, government happens to be one of the largest funder in the sector. It's not only the largest funder, but possibly with the government only, you can think of models of PPP that actually work. I mean, and one has seen all kinds of PPP models. Amber happens to be one of the great successes in the skill development sector. Skill impact bond that we experimented with at LSDC happens to be one of the better models because government allows you to fail, right, without too much of fear of the you know the repercussions that would be there. So those kind of experimentations are possible when the programmatic ability of the private sector matches uh, the funding capability and also the risk absorption capacity of the government, and the two can actually come together in order to create models that will work and that people can actually sort of adopt in order to scale. Uh, so these are two quick points. As far as there's another discussion these days is about, in addition to skilling for the domestic jobs, one is also focusing upon international mobility opportunities and sort of this cherished vision of making India the skill capital of the world. Now, in my previous assignment and also with the Foundation, we are trying to work with our international partners for filling the international opportunities. But all those numbers that you see, that India has this capability of sort of moving some 8 to 10 million people every year, I think many of those numbers actually remain on paper, and probably a very critical examination of that those numbers is actually required, right? So this whole remittance potential, people say, can actually go up to tens of billions and tens of billions of dollars every year. But I think all that needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. There too is a great information asymmetry that exists, and government alone, with the kind of resources that it has, working with the private sector, can create the kind of information repository that the private sector operators can really work with. So I think that in my view is the third point. And yeah, for now, these are three observations that I'd like you to ponder over.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manish. I think what resonates most or could be is about the marriage between future of work and future of education. That's a very important point that you made. Thank you for that. Having understood the macro lens and the policy and programmatic point of views, let's shift gears a little and move to something that's transforming the space at a lightning pace, and that's technology. So, Jyoti, I'd like to come to you first about, as technology continues to reshape how we learn and work, how do you think we can ensure that it, narrows the digital divide rather than widens it?
So one thing I can't agree more with my co-panelists is that we all know technology is moving at the fastest pace ever. And I'm not really sure whether the real challenge is here to keep up with it or the challenge of taking everybody along with it. So in NASCOM Foundation, I think the question that you posed is very rightly taken by us, because we do believe that our core mission in the work that we do is to narrow that digital divide that exists in the context of India between the urban and rural, maybe between the haves and have-nots. Now, the thing is that just because there's a tech perspective to it, how we see technology as an enabler. And for us, it is really not the end in itself in the work that we do. For us, access is the starting point. And we believe the real magic happens when access turns into an opportunity for the people that we work with. And if I may give an example or two, that for us, when we work with a young woman in a tribal block who we help to get a remote job, or if you're working with people with disabilities and they land their first, digital savvy or tech-enabled job, for us, it's not really the job in itself. It's the fact that it actually builds their confidence and it makes them independent. And for us, that is the real transformation where technology actually brings in changing lives. So I know we've been talking about outputs and outcomes. We try to stretch it a little further. We like to talk about impact. And when we talk about impact, I would say that if you just look at the digital story of the country, I think the whole digitalization has actually changed and reshaped how development has happened in India. If I may give an example, and I'm not a tech-savvy person, but nevertheless, the integrated set of digital platforms, like we may say the Aadhaar UPI, the digital locker, the digi locker, all of those, what do they actually do? They're actually enabling seamless access, innovation, and inclusion at a large scale. And the point here is that these are not standalone, initiatives. What they're really reinforcing is that technology is actually leaping and reaching to the last mile and works for the very last person. So yeah, there's demand, and we're talking about the demand-driven approach and all of that. We'll come to that in a while. But for us, the question that you said, um, for us, inclusion defines the quality. It doesn't dilute it. And how that's the case is because we believe when we put focus on technology, it's with the intent to bridge that divide. To really, make it, not to let it deepen, because if we do not work with the marginalized and if we do not take technology to them, I think it's going to be, it's going to really, really deepen the divide that already exists in our large country between the haves and have-nots. So, just to say a little bit about National Foundation, we are based on the theory or the philosophy or tech for good, where we work to make the digital economy work for everyone else, especially those who are left out. And there's one point that I do think is very necessary to raise in this conversation when we're talking about skilling, and we talk about skilling the most marginalized. And here I believe if there's one big takeaway for us in the skilling space and in the work that we do, and that is that technology must speak the language of the learner. When the community is taught by community leaders, it's taught in their own regional language, that's the time when technology becomes real and relatable. So you're not really just imparting a skill, you're actually changing the whole narrative where they become lifelong learners. So for us, that's very, very important. And in our sector, we very often talk about collaboration. I don't think we can understate it at all. I think collaboration is a superpower. And in here, like you rightly have said, government is a real big player in this. We believe the work that we do is meant for really, not just the SDGs, but the national development goals. And I feel that unless and until we collaborate with the government, the industry, the civil society, when we come together for data, for resources, and for accountability, like you have said before me, I think that's where technology actually becomes the bridge, and it's no longer a barrier. And if I may come to an end to this question, I will say that we cannot deny that the world is changing rapidly. Technology is changing even more rapidly. But in this case, inclusion will remain a choice. But it should be a choice that we should choose to take, not a choice where it's an option to omit. And I would say that if every digital leap that we take globally or in the country, if every digital leap is built on the basis of inclusion and empathy, I don't think there can be a faster way to bridge or close the circle, because I think we all know that nobody can close the digital gap alone. We have to collaborate.
Thank you so much, Jyoti. That some very important points emerged from that. Thank you for elaborating on. It's about not just about the digital access or just the devices that we provide. It's also about creating the enabling environment for it. So thanks so much for that. And I'd like to deep dive a little bit with Kishore now on having led the several CSR initiatives with Microsoft. From your perspective, what should corporations do in terms of playing the roles for today's job and in shaping the mindset and competencies for the jobs that don't yet exist? So if you can come.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. And yeah, it was a good introduction from Generation. I think I felt that they covered the entire panel already when they started. And I was thinking it might get difficult as we go in the panel. But then I'm glad that the questions were arranged in such a way that we could share our experiences. I think I would like to share or start from sharing 3 instances and then dive into what we can do. I think one is, I know as Jyoti mentioned, technology evolves and it is evolving faster and at a rapid pace. So to give an example, I think when Satya comes to India, Satya Nadella comes to India every year. January, you see him in India, there is announcements. So when he came 2 years back, he said Microsoft is a cloud AI sustainability company. And then when he came last year, he said Microsoft is an AI company whose primary goal is to make sure everyone has access to AI tools that will make them successful. And he is yet to come, but already in July he mentioned that Microsoft is now a company which makes everyone become a software factory where everyone can build their own applications they want and they can be successful. So which understands and emphasizes the way in which the technology is going at a rapid pace at this juncture. And the kind of information or knowledge related to that is being published in various reports. Microsoft does Future of the Work report, LinkedIn does report. Even at the panel, I think at the Stein auditorium, there was one report that got published. I think there is enough data available or different variety of data that is getting published by corporates, government agencies and everyone. But then what the skill development head of a state government says, I am not able to kind of get this information from the industries and then make that, what to say, workforce optimization for my state. He is not able to build it. Like what I'm saying is, yes, technology is transforming rapidly. Yes, all the corporates individually are making their reports, making available the work trend indexes, everything available. But then that information and data is not getting accessible to the policymakers from various. Microsoft has to give on AI, maybe the sales shell has to give on sustainability, and that information has to be passed on to the government who should use it to kind of map against their indices and then kind of say this is my workforce and this is what is available and I should kind of now make such kind of policy decisions and program of viability to get such kind of skillings happen here. I think that's like first aspect for it. Data is available, but then data is not accessible. You can fit this again against government, you can fit this against trainers, non-profits are there, they keep training on them, then they say that we do not know what are the latest technologies, they keep training on what is there. So again, if you say, again, say we can also say academia also. Academia is there, they are training on say this outdated curriculum or government is trying to induce a national apprentice scheme or integration of vocational education, but then again, the data is not possible. So mine is number one, access to data and making it available all across spectrums, and industries beyond their regular skilling programs that we do can always contribute to it and then make it available to the stakeholders, number one for me. Once you have data and it is available for everyone, that is clear. But then what shall I do with the data as a learner? Yes, I know that green skill jobs is there. I know that solar panel installer job is there. Where should I go? What should I do? I think next corporates can also build on tools or frameworks or applications that can decipher that data and then give it in a format that can help in matching the skill set to the data. That's my point. In the sense, like you can work on building those applications again for all the layers, academia, government, everyone. Like we can kind of make it available so that again there I will say LinkedIn has a tool where you can always say if I have this quantitative aptitude, what are the skill sets? Can I become a server? Can I also become a software engineer? There are organizations like HackerRank who HackerRank, sorry. They try to kind of recruit based on micro credential, coding. Things are there, but then again, can you kind of link them all? Can you kind of make it in such a way that anyone who knows this is where job is there can also kind of understand what is the skill set I have. You also have career counseling, people do that. You also have psychometric assessment, people do that. But link them all, make it clear and make it available in such a way that I know that for my skill, for that job, what do I have, which are all the tools that help me to understand what should I do and make it available again at school level, non-profit or trainer level, even industry level also. I missed that point, even industry also, workforce adjustment also has to happen. Then when you have this both, you know what it is, where to do and what to do, then make available all the training programs at every level. Like some may need at fluency level, some may need at productivity level, not one size fits all. Some may need at in-depth training level to kind of go for jobs. Some may need at adoption level just to kind of make money out of it. Some may need at in-depth level to make research and development and go further. I think that's my third layer to say that, okay, I understood. Now I have data programs that are accessible. Again, same academia, government, trainers, industry, everywhere make it available. That's like the framework. Like you can say 4 into 3. You can kind of say once you have this, Then my last two layers are like, yes, I have training programs, I am doing them, but then this is future technology, correct? I am doing AI, or maybe I am doing on sustainability, maybe I am doing on quantum. I got fluency, I got adaptability, or I got application. But then where are the tools that help me to practice? Are there enough tools where I can kind of apply it? Can I kind of be expert in it? So corporates can try to go ahead and build those tools. Not necessarily only do the training, you can always kind of invest in building those applications, especially at places where it is not available, so that all this previous layer trainings will go beyond the training and it will go to that application, and you are giving them the space to kind of experiment, get credential, everything, whatever you feel. And the last layer is, because again, like as jobs and everything comes, we know that you have to not just say that jobs are not enough. Like for example, even I do AI training. We are an AI company. All our training is on AI skilling only. But I do know that for all the AI skilling, I do freshers don't get jobs on AI. Like it is the 2 years, 3 years experience people who get enough jobs. I'm still struggling to kind of put freshers in software developer job and then make them say that they also know AI so that they can do better software development. But GitHub Copilot does better software development than that. So what I'm trying to convey is not just say that we are training, tools are there, everything, but also try to create alternate or be that pioneer and create those job opportunities yourself in your programs. Try to kind of say, if she is a rural woman and if she gets access to this tool, I'm trying to kind of currently do an CSR impact assessment job worker program. Something which I'm trying to experiment in Nagpur and all that belt of Vidarbha and everywhere, where for all the CSR program everyone is doing, for all the ground level worker who is there, can I get, kind of generate a new revenue for them with AI, where the knowledge that she is possessing, if she can kind of type it with AI and there is a new revenue stream that is getting generated, where we are both solving the problem of I'm not knowing what is happening in the ground, and there is someone who is in the ground who can do, and there is also an AI tool which can help her to say that she does not know technology. AI will help her to take her domain knowledge and the technology support, make sure that she is kind of contributing back the data that you need, which makes your work transparent, efficient, and everything. But in the meantime, I created a new job role, and if people are interested, more people can take it up, etc. So what I'm trying to say is, go beyond just getting people skilled and then putting them there. Go to the next level of trying to kind of create those job roles and then collaborate, work with NASCOM, work with what is HSW, try to kind of get them to co-fund it and then expand it further, explore other avenues. I think that's where I will stop now. And thank you.
Thanks, Kishore. You've spoken really well about the role of corporates that they need to make from talking to the government and then translating that into tools that can be used so that people can skill themselves. So thanks so much for covering that. Now we've spoken about policy, we've spoken about the role that corporates need to play. Now let's talk about the role of data and evidence and how we can move to measuring what really matters. So Rajat, I'll come to you first. If you can elaborate on how can evidence from programs like Amber be leveraged to influence workforce policy, funding priorities, and maybe training design as well.
Hello? Yeah. I think data is pretty much everything, right? So if you do have the data, then you can do things with it using technologies of today, whether it's AI or otherwise. I think to me, I think measurement at every stage of this. So one is, once the data is available, if it's synthesized, if action automatically follows, right? Because people can't ignore that. The challenge is in what data where, right? So I'm going to talk a bit about that, right? And as I see it, there are 5 points of data, and I'm coming from knowing what I know about generation and the work that we do. Is really there are 5 places where data is needed, right? One is at the input stage, when the person is coming in for skilling. You need to know enough about them to be able to figure out what kind of job role is appropriate for them, whether they're fit for the program, not fit for the program, whether they stick around, not stick around. I think that's one level of data. The second is the use of data, maybe technologies also, in the capability transfer itself, the training, the process of training. Again, some of our speakers spoke about that. How can you use data for that to make it much more effective, right? The third is data for placement. So you need to know where the jobs are, you need to know how the match will occur. And that data, once matched together with your trainees, trainees-based data, you can create placement or matching of jobs. I think there's data around retention, right? And that in some ways informs every step prior to that. If you do have this, let me just, okay, fourth is data on retention, and then fifth is data on long-term employment. What happens to this person 5 years later, right? Relative to some others who did not go through, let's say, a formal skilling program or another effort, right? Is there a fundamental difference in their outcomes? Now that, in some ways, that final outcome data, the interim outcome of placement retention, etc., then should inform every step before, right? So in some ways, data in our, at least in my view, is everything, and that is also the foundation of our work at Generation. Let me switch also along the same value chain to technology, right? I mean, you talked about elements of technology. If I had a wish list, what I'd love to have is maybe 5 apps, right, which make our life easier in doing what we do, right? So app number 1 is for recruiting people, right? Bringing in people who are interested in, if there was an appropriate app which found the right people and figured out their competency levels or incoming intrinsics, let's say, not competency, but intrinsics to do a certain job. But how we do it today is we send them, for example, to a hospital shop floor for a day, or a retail shop floor for a day to figure out whether they let them see it practically, right? So, but is there database ways of doing that which makes that one day effort of going somewhere and figuring it out much easier, faster in some ways, right? So, for recruiting the candidates. That second, I would say, is technology, the delivery of skills. If there was a nice app which allowed us to deliver different types of skills with appropriate physical intervention, because some of this has to be practical, that would be great. I think the third is data for finding jobs, or technology for finding jobs. And I'll come back to some of the foundation layers that are needed. The fourth is for support. Actually, around the finding jobs, fourth thing will be data which then is carried or stuck lifelong with us. Today it's our resume in some ways, right? Or we carry this data in a conversation, and I'll show up, I'll talk about myself, and that's the data that's being transmitted, and that will create a job opportunity or some opportunity for me. But can that be converted into data, like a metadata of a photograph? I'm showing up along with me showing up my metadata. Right? So the skills passport equivalent, for example. That's important tech or data that has to be available. And then there is technology and an app for matching. So we know where the jobs are, finding jobs, and we can match my skills passport to that job and then keep updating. So these are five odd apps that would be great to have, right? Automated with AI, with great amount of data. Underlying this, of course, there has to be candidate data on the one hand, individual, and there has to be company or jobs data on the other. And these things become very important with the gig economy becoming more prevalent, with people preferring part-time jobs, with jobs becoming part-time in their nature, right? Can we even say that is in India's employment 5 or 6%? We don't even really know that. We say it's 5 or 6%. But is it really that? What about underemployment? What about the hours that somebody didn't work? What about the hours that somebody did not want to work? So for all of these things, I think data and technology is quite critical.
Thank you, Rajat. Thank you for literally developing a playbook here, sitting here and stitching tech and data together for every step of the skilling value chain. Moving on, Manisha, I'd like to come to you and dig deeper about measuring long-term outcomes. How can we measure and track long-term impact of skill development initiatives to ensure that investments translate into sustained career opportunities?
It's a very difficult question. In fact, this whole scaling ecosystem has been struggling to find answers to this question. I think answer somewhere lies in building this success metric of a program very early in the program design itself. And unlike many publicly funded programs where probably you just restrict yourself to measuring what is the pass rate and what is the employment rate, but we need to go further. And you need to see how long the person actually stayed in employment. For that matter, are there some evidences of the same person actually receiving some kind of an upskilling and reskilling? Now there's a lot of systems now available for all of us to gather that. So that is the other part. And I think the very short-termish approach to a slightly longer term in terms of investing into what happens to the person in the entire life cycle, right? And many of these programs will actually stop at just the employment and not really even track these 3 months, 6 months data. One is probably it's difficult to collect because it's just not the responsibility in a typical government funded kind of program setting for the government to get access to what happened after the person got released because there's not enough readiness on the side of the enterprise. I mean, leave alone government funding programs, their own L&D programs, we go and start talking about what happened to people after training and whether some of those trainings actually translated into behaviors, workplace behaviors, and whether it is impacting the organization in any which way. I would feel they themselves generate enough data, right? Largely, learning and development, you see, within the organization is actually left to somebody who's the weakest. I mean, a lot of organizations which actually handle the mental of learning and development to somebody who is not found fit otherwise, right? Which is actually not in the long-term interest of the organization, especially when the scaling has actually become very, very critical in view of the future work and the way that technology is changing, the skill requirement of individuals working for an enterprise is changing. So I think that is important. I think there's some data points that can be possibly made use of. There's been of late some effort to look at the ESIP of data to find out what has happened and whether people who have actually been trained in a certain way or been beneficiary of a program, whether they have been able to become part of the workforce. My theory is, and I actually like to experiment with this a little more, this whole employment-linked incentive ELIS scheme, and I feel that that becomes an important data point for all of us to look at. If you're able to bring in enterprises, especially for the formal sector employment, you can possibly think of bringing more of those enterprises which are going to be beneficiary of ELIS is one large scheme. And it's just not large enterprises, but also a lot of temp hiring and temp staffing companies that are going to make use of it. If we are able to make use of that scheme well, I think there's a lot of data points that can actually emanate from that. So that can also give us some crucial data. Third is, I think, Rajat partly covered it. So this whole results chain approach, which I feel is very important. So in a scaling program, you typically stop at whether the person has been able to pass that examination, whether the person has actually been able to secure employment. There too, this pass rate and is very questionable, right? The way we are certifying a candidate and assessing the candidate in the short-term scaling program is a huge suspect. Believe you me, the kind of signaling value that the assessment of the certification from a skilling program should carry is not carrying. And there, I feel, is a huge opportunity and possibility of using tech to standardize it, to make it much more robust than what it is right now. So that is at least in our level of control, people who are funding this skilling opportunity. And then engaging with the enterprises on the other side on a long-term basis to find out if people are doing what they're supposed to do. Therefore, it gives you a lot of actionable inputs in terms of how do you improve programs. And a related point is how do you build capacity around this? Because I think there's both appetite and capacity missing, both on the side of the government, or for that matter, public funder, and also the enterprises. So this probably needs a lot of advocacy, capacity building, and a lot of tech needs to possibly be used in order to streamline this whole thing. Yeah, so these are the 4-5 things.
Thanks, Manish. I think that's a great segue to my next question, which is about the role of philanthropy. Philanthropy has been traditionally focused on short-term projects, and they focus on evolving from funding standalone programs to, say, shaping systems and partnerships. That has been slightly less. So, if you can, with your experience of donors, possibly you can elaborate a little bit on how that can change.
Sure. So first thing is I find it a little uneasy to call CSR philanthropy these days. And the reason why I say so is because in the 12 years of CSR, if we say that we have invested more than 35,000 crore annually, which is the CSR budget for India, I'd be a little skirmish of calling it philanthropy. I believe that the potential that exists in CSR today is phenomenal when it comes to nation building. And I'm really happy at the choice of panelists that I have today, quite esteemed and very well versed in the CSR they contribute to. So let's do us a service and not call it philanthropy. But then again, the question that you've asked is so much at the heart of how CSR has evolved in India today. And I want to say that I really liked what my panelists have said before me. Firstly, let's come from the fact that even as a foundation, we are not going to dismiss the fact that data assessment and measurement is not crucial. It is very crucial. I agree with you. I also agree with the fact that yes, there needs to be a little more advocacy around it. And I wish to do that advocacy today. I want our CSR to focus on what Manish rightly said, on the capacity building. Because I believe that the way CSR has evolved is so short term. How it's okay to talk about outcomes and maybe activities and outcomes with CSR funding that is less than 12 months. Because from the time you do it, it's not even a yearly cycle. It boils down to like 6 or 8 months. And what kind of outcomes are we talking about? We are, as organizations, when we are talking about transforming lives, we're talking about impact. Even outcomes cannot be measured in 12 months. How can you measure impact in 12 months? So there are a lot of things that I would like to advocate for. One is the fact that we really need to look at CSR and how it's done to be able to do what you guys have said. Let's measure what we're doing. Let's see where the real change is coming. And it's not about the numbers. It's not about, okay, how many people train. Not even so much that how many of them stay in 2 jobs in 3 months down the line or 6 months down the line. What we are talking about, let's talk about how those jobs have actually transformed, changed their lives. Are these livelihoods and how they're making a change? You know, when talking about India and you talk about $1 trillion, let's talk about how lives are changing from 15,000 rupees a month to like 50,000 rupees a month. That's the kind we are talking about. And let's all agree that a 1-year project will not help measuring any of this. So we'll go back despite all our efforts and all right-meaning data that we wish to collect. We will then have to gather together and advocate for CSR, no longer philanthropy, but a big push on nation building to change the way it functions. Let's talk about not projects, let's talk about long-term programs, like you said. And long-term programs are nothing less than 5-10 years. Let's talk about, let's not talk about compliance anymore in CSR. Can we talk about commitment? Can we talk about collaboration where government, CSR companies, and civil society can actually invest together in resources, in creating platforms, and actually being committed to changing and transforming lives of whichever population we decide to work on. So that's one thing, because we all know the big truth is scaling outcomes cannot happen in a year or less, right? So we all agree on that. So we're all for long-term assessment, but what we are really trying to say is that things really need to change. And one thing, like I think Manish slightly touched on, and I do want to end with that advocacy, if I can, on this forum, is that say that when we come together under CSR, when we talk about projects, we also have to fund data. We also have to fund measurement. We also have to fund shared infrastructure. Because this is not overhead costs. Because unless and until you stop looking at, and maybe I think Manish you meant it in the right way, when you said that the malfunction, the learning elements are left to people who you don't think are really making too much impact in an organization. And that's the mindset we need to change because it's so crucial. So can we start looking at these as agents that are enabling and the ones that actually fit in accountability in the work that we're doing. So, we on a submission to you guys, being the givers of CSR and those who are the receivers of CSR, we really need to collectively change the narrative when it comes to measurements and impact and add some money behind it so that we can actually do justice to the real lives that we are transforming because we are not able to build that narrative. So we have to stop just tracking numbers, we have to track the narratives that we are really working with.
Thank you so much. It was a very powerful statement, Jyoti, on how CSR needs to go beyond just tracking numbers and the short term, measuring only outcomes in the short term, but going beyond. Uh, Just moving on and my last question to Kishore, specifically with Microsoft and what approaches or frameworks does Microsoft use to evaluate sustained impact of workforce? You can elaborate on that and then.
Sure. I think I would limit myself to Microsoft. The reason being, as I would say Manish was mentioning, all of us are trying to kind of get these frameworks to achieve that sustained impact. So at Microsoft, I think if we look at it, because skilling is what we do, 70% of the funds we put in skilling and remaining 30% into innovation. And basically, AI skilling and innovation is what we do. And if you look at it, I think our approach towards measurement and making sure that the programs are sustainable, I think we start in the program design. Like that's like layer one. Once you have a good program design which is sustainable in nature, then you can actually build on the components. And that program design normally comes under three pillars. Normally, what we try to do is we don't normally give grants or we don't kind of get proposals and fund projects. What we try to do is we kind of try to drive that 5 or 6 problem statements in skilling that we want to solve for the next 5 years or 7 years, and then try to kind of work on sub projects that go and meet that goal. And how do we arrive at it? We normally derive through 3 broader principles. One is what does Microsoft globally want to do? What does that globally they are saying? What does Microsoft India is wanting to achieve and what are its priorities and what does it want to kind of stand for in the country, especially to go to the India that is untouched by Microsoft, etc. And third is again linked back to the government of India's priorities on skilling, especially around AI. So we try to kind of do a triangle of it, kind of bucket out what are the problem statements that we want to kind of solve from there, and then we try to kind of go against the beneficiary, how they will get benefited in that problem statement. In the sense, who should be involved in this problem statement for getting skill and who is deserving the most. And if we do it for them, what intervention if you do will give them the highest revenue by getting skill. And by getting them skill for a highest revenue, in which sectors and domains are we sending them so that their future is taken care. It shouldn't be that like you shouldn't be skilling and then like kind of leaving at say 6 months, they kind of go back, etc. And fourth point is like as you do that, their future is taken care, and those are the domains which are kind of similar to what industry is demanding, and those are the places where we will be like more and more jobs get created, and are we able to kind of send them. So one, use a triangle of global, India, government, micro, to say priorities, try to land problem statements, and those problem statements try to get convert them into a programs by looking at the beneficiary at this angle. I think this is what first we do, and then we normally derive the program. And once you have defined the program, then we go back to the performance indicators that we want to kind of achieve from the program, because you have it, and that is mostly again not that on number of trained and skilled, etc., but it is mostly around what type of indicators you want to kind of take against participation. People who are participating, are they coming and attending in what is the numbers, are the programs defined in such a way that there is increased interest, whether you do online, offline, still people find value in it, does it provide free of cost, what to say, amenities that makes them conducive, etc. So it's like indices on participation, indices on participant, because like they are coming here and they should feel valued in the skilling program, they should feel that yes, it is giving me job, yes, it is empowering me, so etc. So that kind of, then indices on the stakeholders, in the sense like the trainers, training bodies, non-profits, like what value does it generate for them? They feel that by involving in this program, I am also going to get a new engagement model which I will scale further. By doing this program model, I am able to kind of get this linkage done to some of the requirements that are there. I think indices of that stakeholders, and finally indices of the industry, because at the end of the day, what are the jobs that are there, and whether this kind of trainings are giving that necessary candidates who are going there, and are they getting trained and to meet the job requirements. I think that's the second point. And the last point, I think I'll just stop it here, is more on once you have the good program design and you have defined what do you want to achieve, I think mostly our focus is more on data collection tools and what is say mediums that will help this program to be effectively deployed. I think we try to touch upon all the mediums of learning, mediums of measurement, tools like visualization, everything that makes in such a way that you are able to take decisions, you are able to kind of understand that your program is being deployed effectively and efficiently, so that you are able to kind of tell that impact in the long run. I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Kishore. Thank you for laying down the methodical approach that you take for measuring outcomes. Unfortunately, we are running short of time, so we don't have time for the last question or the audience question. But thank you once again. We've spoken about policy, programs, we've spoken about the need for CSR to fund long-term outcomes. It's been lovely having you all here and hearing your perspectives, the rich perspectives that you brought.